Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, I
Yeah.
can.
Okay.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Had a very nice summer and just sort of the weather's turning here. It's a beautiful
Yeah,
autumn is appearing. Yeah.
we're
How,
we're having kind of a long. We had a wet summer, so I think we're gonna have a long change of seasons with uh, with
yeah.
lots of. Oh,
Sorry, we had a very dry summer, very
mm,
hot. So like a lot of you saw the pictures probably of Europe, and it was
yeah,
also the same up
yeah,
here. Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. A lot of variation, a lot of variability, a lot of strange anomalous weather, which I guess is really sort of what they predicted for climate change. Everybody expected, I mean, at least in America, people seem to have taken a very simplistic view of that and decided that, well, if it's not really hot out all the time, then it's not getting, then it's not global warming.
Yeah, I think that's what they've said here too. It's like Helsinki will get warmer,
Hmm.
and but we'll get more snow in
Hmm.
winter also. So
Well, and yeah, I mean, if I were going to worry about kind of Northern Europe, I'd worry about Copenhagen because it's so low. Um,
yeah,
and really kind of that whole region seems to be very vulnerable at sea level.
yeah. I can't remember what the forecast is for like 1.5 degree warming is. How many, how much the water will rise, but
Yeah.
at least in Finland, when you plan a new building, you have to. I think is it 3 meters? It has to be above
Mm.
uh, water, the sea level. So
Hmm. Yeah. Hey,
they're
Pat.
trying, they're trying to make sure that yeah, they're trying to make sure that these modern buildings here are already planned for some rising water levels.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't know what cities. I think cities like New York are planning. Are planning just to build a wall all the way around. Uh,
Yeah, and look, I don't know how Miami or New Orleans and Miami, that
yeah.
they're quite flying cities, right? So have
Yeah.
they got one? I don't know. Probably
Well,
not.
and there has been the Mississippi Delta, Louisiana in general has just lost um, so much land in the last 25 years that yeah, it does seem like it's a problem that's already kind of well underway for them, for other reasons as well, but yeah, we yeah, it's a new world. I guess that's I didn't love Bill McKibben's book, The Earth with the two A's, EAARTH. Um, but I thought he made some points that ought to have been more, ought to have been,
Yeah,
gotten more response, more traction. Um,
I
yeah.
don't know that book, so I will look it up. Yeah,
Yeah, it's sort of, um I think the subtitle is something like, living on a new hot different planet kind of thing. Like all of the thesis is that, everything that we know about how to be in the world is going to change. So I think that's yeah, I don't know. I think that there were for a while there in the early 2000s, there are a bunch of people who were writing sort of these dystopian books. I think even David Holmgren, the permaculture guy, wrote a kind of sort of a Anthropocene, post-apocalyptic thing with 4 scenarios of how the world system might respond, sort of ranging from um, full on kind of fascism to something a little bit more tolerable in the kind of best case scenario. But he divided it into I think into different ways that governments and people might respond along those kinds of axes: authoritarianism versus other approaches. So
there's a book I read that I forget the title of right now off the top of my head, that claimed that the Syrian war was the first war that was or at least the seeds of the war were due to global warming. So I don't know if that's true or not, but
because of refugee movement or
no, I think that I think that in the book they said that the local tribes and the local leaders used to allocate the water resources for, and Assad came and overruled that because they had 2 or 3 droughts in a row, and that was the seed for the fighting. Gave them to his mates and everything. But
yeah, okay, so it's a water war. Yeah, well, and they did predict that I mean, when the whole Cochabamba thing blew up in 2000, that they began saying, okay, water is the petroleum of the 21st century, and the wars will be fought about that. Hello, John. Hello, Tim.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good, and you?
Good. Yeah, a little bit frazzled still. It was a busy start to the semester, and I think it's calming down a little bit, but it's hard to tell from day to day.
I remember those days myself.
Yeah, it's been, and I'm trying to do a couple of new things, and some of them are working out better than others. So that's thrown some variability into the thing. We were just talking about our sort of our favorite climate change books. Naomi Oreskes wrote one as well, I think, with a co-author that was also a kind of a post-apocalyptic, looking backward from the future on kind of hypothetically what had happened in the next 25 or 50 years. So yeah, a lot of people in about a decade ago were spilling a lot of ink on that. And it didn't really go anywhere.
The last one I read was Ministry for the Future.
Kim Stanley Robinson.
Yeah,
I haven't read that yet.
A more positive sort of sounding, positive way to look at the future. Hard-fi. Yeah, I'm not. I enjoyed it. There's some weaknesses to the book and everything.
Yeah, I like science fiction. I've never gotten into him yet, for some reason. I was reading. I read the 3-body problem series, or whatever it is, the Earth, the Chinese series about the dark forest theory. I read those. I really liked the Hannu Ryanimi series, the Quantum Thief. That I thought was really, really good. It had a lot in it. For a while, I was reading the Scottish guy. What's his name? The Laundry Files.
In Banks or
no. He was in that, but he was actually in the writing group that Hannu Ryanimi was in Edinburgh. Let me think. Charles Stross. And he's written, he's pretty prolific. He's written, several kind of long series of books. And then I read the Rifter series, which was not the Jin Hale one, but the Peter Watts, kind of a post-apocalyptic thing as well. And Peter Watts had written a couple of alien encounter books as well, Echopraxia, and I don't remember what the other one was, which he's apparently some type of psychologist, but he has a very, very bleak vision of humanity and human nature. So I've been sort of hoping to find one that is that is a little bit lighter and has kind of a little bit more positive outlook on the world. Although I have to say, I think Hano Ryanimi was kind of uplifting. And I really kind of felt good after reading those, where I didn't kind of feel great after reading Peter Watts. I kind of felt like, well, that was unnecessarily bleak and almost a little bit sociopathic in the way that he wrote, not only in his characters, but also in the way that he wrote it. So it would be nice to see something else. So, and I am excited that Pirate Enlightenment, Chris posted a notice that just dropping into everything there. Okay. Tim says he's having trouble because it's a Saudi national holiday and he's not going to be able to connect well. So, hi Tim. we won't expect audio from you today, but yeah. All right. Yes. So So okay, we'll see you next week. I will. I'll post this, and we may not meet for the whole time, because what I really sort of wanted to see if people can, continue to want to do this and all of that, because I wasn't really 100% sure. I mean, I've been kind of away from it for so long that hey, quiet. My little dog is blind now, so when the cats want to play with him, he gets nervous. And actually, maybe I'll do you want to go outside? Go outside. Go outside. All right. He's actually an old dog, and he's had diabetes, so he's hanging on, but he's not as spry as he used to be, and he's a little bit crankier. But in any case, I didn't do a good job of kind of collecting all of the things that people had suggested. I did make recently I made a book suggestion page, and Louis, was that you that put those on there? Because I noticed you were in.
No, it was me.
Oh, okay. Hey, Pat. Yeah, I got a little notice on the top of my screen when people alter the default. So I got notices that both of you had. Okay, so yeah, Pirate Enlightenment, I think will be fun to do in January. The Daniel Surgeon, I actually have a copy of that over on my shelf, and I bought it as a result of kind of seeing him interviewed by somebody and thinking, okay, he's provocative, and I do tend to gravitate towards, or at least be curious about, perspectives that kind of challenge the traditional, dominant narrative. I guess I wouldn't be against that one, but I did kind of feel like it's pretty out there. Have you read it, Pat?
Which one?
The True History of the United States one.
No, I haven't.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I would be. I mean, if people wanted to read that, I would be up for that.
You said it sounded kind of weird or something like that.
Well, he. I think he kind of. I wouldn't say it's all the, it's kind of conspiracy theory stuff, but I would probably say that when given a choice, he sort of puts the worst possible construction on on state action and the motives for American kind of state action in a way that that maybe that maybe Howard Zinn did in some passages, but not necessarily all. So I would say he's sort of beyond Zinn and maybe kind of on the way to Chomsky. Pat, John, what are your thoughts? And then
I'm sorry, I was swatting a fly.
oh, okay.
I apologize.
You still got flora and fauna alive in here.
Yeah, I'm outside.
Okay. Yeah, I think I haven't seen. Yeah, that's the one thing about this time of year. When we get into the fall, is we see fewer mosquitoes, and although we do kind of have, the hornets come out looking for water and stuff. But so yeah, we could do that. I had thought there was some kind of some energy behind the other one, the Eppard book, Poorly Understood, which is apparently about poverty in America currently. And I haven't actually downloaded it and started reading it yet. I read as much, actually. You can read a whole bunch of it just by doing the preview in Amazon. They give you a lot to look at, and I think it probably is. I think it'll probably be interesting. I imagine it'll be kind of, from what I've looked at, I've glanced at so far. I think it'll be, it's not going to be a surprising kind of perspective for most of the people in the group, who are kind of relatively on that side, after reading Graeber and Wengrow and Piketty and all that.
I've read the first 8 chapters so far.
Okay.
How
do you find it?
I find it fine. It deals with the idea that if you're poor, you deserve to be poor.
Uh-huh.
Therefore, we shouldn't worry about you. I think a lot of the support for Trump has come out of the feeling, the real feeling, based on reality, that for much of the American populace, there is a worsening of conditions and outlook of conditions.
Uh-huh.
And this takes us back to Piketty's inequality. And he shows the rapid rise of inequality since 1980. And my theme has been that is a direct result of politics, which he also says.
Uh-huh.
And it's a direct result, particularly of the Republican Party's focus on reducing taxes, which has clearly been a driving force for shifting income and wealth to the 1%. And this book attacks this also, the idea that, well, if you're poor, you deserve to be poor because you're not working hard enough.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, it's because the system is structured against you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
And
one of the
I'm thinking particularly of right now with the Federal Reserve increasing interest rates so rapidly to fight the sudden inflation that we are experiencing. And that hits directly at anyone who is at the lower levels of the economic structure.
Mhm.
But I think a lot of the fury and the angst that Trump has very well tapped into. I mean, he's a superb marketer. He's a superb speaker,
Mhm.
and he's created about 73 million supporters by addressing that angst, but in reality not doing anything about it. In reality, making it worse
Mhm.
through the tax cut that was passed under his first administration. And they say
Right.
first with the hopes that there won't be a second.
First administration, yes.
But
Like,
I'm afraid there might be.
he could be the next Grover Cleveland. Serve non-consecutive terms. Yeah, who was also, when he wasn't president, Grover Cleveland actually, surprise, was on Wall Street. So history repeats itself. Yeah, I think the things that sort of jumped out at me from glancing at it so far was and when I was looking at the graphs too, the idea that he's counting age cohorts of people who are in poverty. One of the things that jumped out at me a bit was this idea of poverty not really being a permanent condition, but being an economic circumstance that people kind of go in and out of based on kind of economic cycles and other things and and policies and that sort of thing. So that might be kind of fun to drill down into a little bit. Yeah, I think the Trump thing is, I mean, that was, I mean, it was really unfortunate that people who consider themselves to be liberals and to be on the left side of the aisle didn't take that opportunity to sort of address the issues that resonated with these 70 million plus people about sort of being left behind, and instead, created these conspiracy theories. And I've actually started hearing the 2016 response, the resistance response to Trump, being compared to things like January 6th, right? And that this resistance is, people are starting to say, well, wait a minute, what about, if that one was an insurrection, then what was the thing that happened in the 4 years that Trump was in office? So the idea that was, that we had this, from the perspective of the sort of the entrenched powers that be in the corporate Democrat, corporate Republican kind of center, that was super convenient that we had that, that sort of sideshow to concentrate on for 4 years in the media. So okay, we can talk about that. I think that the support, Louis, you voted for either Poorly Understood or Braiding Sweetgrass. I think there was, I have been kind of curious about Braiding Sweetgrass, but it seemed like it was kind of, seemed like there were people, I mean, Chris is like the holdout of people who are still, I think, hoping to talk more about that kind of stuff. There were some people earlier on in previous incarnations of the club that were kind of interested in that perspective.
I started to read Braiding Sweetgrass, and so far it hasn't really grabbed me.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what the central theme of the book is, other than Native American history, so to speak.
Yeah.
I am interested in what you've said, Dan, about your experience with Native Americans and reservations and so forth. And by the way, do you know if Native American reservations are included in poverty statistics? Are they considered a separate nation that we don't bother to include in American?
I think it depends on the measure, but and actually that was one of the things that, as I was kind of scrolling through what I was able to see in Poorly Understood so far, there was that map of, sort of persistent poverty counties in America, and there's nothing in Minnesota. And I live in this Beltrami County in northern Minnesota, which is the poorest, sort of chronically the poorest county in the state, because we have, because the city of Bemidji is surrounded by the three biggest reservations in the state. And that is, and so so we definitely count that, when we're talking about, when we in the state of Minnesota are talking about our county results and economic, performance. I'm not sure if it rolls into a lot of the national statistics, but I would imagine it probably does. We have, we have a huge, it's kind of weird. We have, for a tiny, for a little town not actually right on the border, we have a huge FBI presence too here, because this is considered to be some sort of drug smuggling corridor through the reservations from Canada, and there isn't very much between us. We're only 100 miles from the border, so so there's it's weird how how these issues get funding focus for things like law enforcement, as opposed to things like public health and prevention and stuff like that. I was on the border last summer in International Falls, and and actually I drove along the border for about, I don't know, 50 or 75 miles. I went to a town that is on the town called Baudette, that is farther to the west at kind of Lake at Lake of the Woods, which is where the northwest angle is and all of that. And then there's a river called the Rainy River, which is the border from there to International Falls, which is on a lake called Rainy Lake. And it's a little river, and you can you're driving along it and you kind of look over the other side, and there's houses and there's farms and things, and a lot of people flying the Canadian flag right at the water's edge. But also, and I thought, wow, that would be kind of cool if you lived on this river. You could kind of boat along the river and pop over to the other side, meet your Canadian neighbors and stuff like that. And I mentioned that while I was eating lunch in International Falls, and I said, well, yeah, theoretically you could do that, and in times past you used to be able to do that, but now Homeland Security is flying drones all the time, and there's a whole there's a whole border control thing going on. And this was sort of it was last summer, at kind of the tail end of COVID, and when the trucker thing was going on in Canada. So there were definitely differences of opinion about that. And you were having, I think you might still have to show proof of vaccination when you cross the border. I'm not 100% sure about that. My wife's going to take my son up to Winnipeg soon to look at a university up there, because Manitoba has incredible reciprocity with Minnesota in college expenses. It actually would cost him less to go to University of Winnipeg than really pretty much any other place that he's looking at. and they have a neuroscience program, which is what he's looking for. So, and it's Winnipeg, so that could be cool. So, yeah.
Speaking of COVID, how is that taking place in the university environment?
We are not really, the Minnesota state system has kind of declared it endemic and over. Some of the Minnesota colleges are still kind of on the edge of being concerned, and I think this summer my son went down to Carleton to a neuroscience program for 3 weeks, and you had to mask inside the classrooms, and this would have been in like late July. I went over, I did a conference thing in August at McAllister in St. Paul, and they were talking about, all of their stuff when the invitations and the confirmations, everything went out. We're talking about masking, and then nobody actually did it. But yeah, I don't know. It seems to be kind of over. I've also run into people out, people who I sort of like and respect out east. There's a woman that I know who works at UNH in Durham, I think, and she's like just panicked and triggered that they're not masking. So it seems like there's still quite a divide, and it's still, and very much along those, red, blue, MAGA, kind of, the assumption is that all the red people are MAGA, and that all of the blue people are sort of woke snowflakes, I think.
There's still 400 people a day dying from COVID. It's still the leading cause of death in the United States. But the media seem to pretty well have dropped it. And,
yes.
And the President Biden has dropped it now.
Right. Yeah. He said it's over.
All these people mixing and nobody wearing a mask.
Mm-hmm.
People still dying.
Is that? I didn't realize that was the statistic, and that it was still the
yeah, it's like the number 3 cause of death.
Wow.
Still.
What are 1 and 2?
Well, I heart attack and just plain dying of old age, I guess. But
okay, yeah, it's those types of statistics have been, again, and we can probably talk about this if we, when we talk about poverty measurement as well. There's got to be a way to generate confidence in these kinds of numbers, because there seem to be a lot of different people in different filter bubbles using different statistics and different numbers to say, well, it's over or it's not over. What gets counted in, initially early on, I think one of the biggest things, it seemed to me, was what goes on death certificates and, as a cause. And I think that has been, that's sort of been an issue probably in American healthcare for a long time. And this just sort of ripped the Band-Aid off it, or exposed it, or put a spotlight on it, that we don't really have as complete an understanding of our, sort of collective ill health as maybe we ought to, and what the causes of it are. So I'm really curious about, about the things that we kind of concern ourselves with, and the things that we don't, in kind of in public health.
Well, I find it difficult to find a good description of what poverty life is like. I
Mhm.
keep asking myself, where's the Grapes of Wrath book
Yeah.
that would focus on this?
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I think that Thomas Frank has written a couple of good things that sort of approach that, and also kind of urban rural divide. I mean, he started with the book about Kansas, and then the people know, and a bunch of things that kind of deal with. And I thought that his approach was interesting because he sort of asks, about what might be similar in leftist populism and conservative populism. And I think there is a sense on both sides of having been sort of left behind and abandoned. And so it's so that's been one of the things that's sort of been that I've been curious about is, why can't, and historically, why can't people, kind of develop in American history, develop more class consciousness?
that would be a good title for a new book. There was a book called Left Behind by, who was it, Tim LaHaye,
Mhm.
About the Second Coming, etc.
Mhm.
But that would be a good book about Left Behind in terms of economics.
Yeah. Oh, Left Behind. The Rapture Left Behind. Yeah. Left Behind in economics. Well, and actually, what's her name? Eisenberg wrote White Trash recently. Or I guess maybe not that recently anymore, but I've just started kind of paying attention to it recently. And yeah, this idea that, I mean, and I think the kind of the approach to that was that there have always been people who have been sort of on the outside of and of this line that's drawn of who counts and who's sort of beyond the pale in terms of either their lifestyle or their opinions or what have you, and sometimes in a benevolent way, right? During the New Deal, the progressives kind of ran around America deworming people, right? Because they figured it was all, that the reason that these people were whatever it was they were white trash or were, kind of irredeemable hicks or whatever, was because they had parasites, and and so they, all that blood loss was affecting their ability to be rational and look out for themselves. But yeah, I think, Pat, you're right. There's an element of deserving, right? And there used to be that term, right? The deserving poor. I mean, even when Georgia was established as a kind of a colony, and it was the only colony ever that the British Crown ever financed sending people to. When Oglethorpe did that, it was for the deserving poor of England, right? People who weren't, who weren't the undeserving poor, who weren't the bad people, who weren't the criminals, who weren't the vagabonds. But how do you measure that, right? If someone is in, the Old Bailey as a debtor, right? And the Old Bailey had its apartments and its, and its meeting places and its banquet halls and everything for the rich debtors. But then it also had, dungeons for the poor ones. Yeah, John.
So I live in California, considered a pretty liberal state, but the state government that thinks of nothing about raising sales tax, raising gasoline tax, which disproportionately affect the poor.
Sure, that's
more than any other group.
Yeah.
But it's hidden. No one ever talks about it. They just, well, let's raise the sales tax another point or two. What's the problem with that? Everybody can afford that, or especially gasoline tax. Right. I mean, we are $1 to $1.25 higher per gallon than most of the rest of the nation. I visit New Jersey quite often, and I always think, oh, those prices are very nice.
Yes. Yeah, we were at 359 a couple days ago.
Oh my God, no, we're going up
Yeah.
at 540.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
349 here in Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's incredible, really, because it's, I mean, I don't think it was 349 before Ukraine began. I think it was 389. So I think this is, it's kind of weird because gasoline is always one of those things that I think, I mean, it's such a major component of the consumer price index that I always think that it is that if somebody wants to turn the dial, right, then that's one of the things that they can adjust in order to make it seem like inflation is ratcheting up or ratcheting down. So I'm always very suspicious of gasoline prices. The thing that I noticed in California, I went out there in the summertime when my dad was in the hospital briefly, and so they live in Woodland, and we were going to. He was in a hospital in Sacramento, so we were driving, and my mother and I were driving into Sacramento, and I could not believe the number of tarp and shopping cart squatter communities just by the roadside. The homelessness in California is mind-boggling. I mean, and I live in a place where it's super, super cold in the winter, so we don't have a lot of people, living under bridges year-round or anything like that. But yeah, that is incredible. And I haven't been to San Francisco in years, so I can only imagine.
Same in downtown LA. I mean, the sidewalks are almost completely blocked by these big tents and homeless communities, and not as much. I live in the suburbs, about 25 miles east of LA, and you don't see it quite as much. But of course, they're not really affected by these things, sales tax or gasoline. So they're sort of immune to that to a certain extent. But it's sort of, I guess there's a term, working poor, that is affected by this. But
Sure. Yeah.
It's one of those covered up things that I find astonishing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of weird. It does seem like I saw, I didn't watch it, but I still, I guess I've watched enough Jimmy Dore videos on YouTube that now they tell me about all of the new ones, and I don't really watch them that much anymore, because I don't like his sidekick really. But there was one that said it was something to the effect that, well, okay, if Biden says the pandemic is over, why are they still firing New York teachers for not being vaccinated? So yeah, it seems like that, like everything is kind of upside down, and also we're sort of engaging on this very, very thin veneer of kind of talking point and sort of flashpoint issues where it's almost actually another example of that I find. My Tesla lease is about to expire next March, and so I'm thinking, well, okay, I'm going to give it back, and I'm not going to get another one, which means I'll have to do something with the charger that I've got in my garage. But also, I was thinking that, when I got this thing, going on 3 years ago, I thought, well, I'll lease it this time because by the next time there'll be more to choose from, right? By 3 years down the line, there'll be, there might be some competitors, or there might be some more, Tesla models or whatever. And, and I might get, and this wasn't the thing that I most wanted, but, it was the best thing available. And, and as I look at that, it's like, there really aren't that many options after 3 years. I mean, there have been a lot of announcements. There have been a lot there, and there are a lot of people who are pretending that they are selling electric vehicles. But, I saw one, and I'm especially thinking of like American companies, right? Like General Motors, right? They announced, I saw an announcement recently that the Chevy Equinox was going to be, there's going to be a full-on EV version of the Equinox. And then I looked at the specs, and it's like, oh, it has 200 miles of range. Well, 200 miles of range, which is effectively probably 150 miles of range, won't get me from Bemidji to the Twin Cities, you know? So that's not useful to me. And I don't actually go, in my Tesla, I don't go to the cities in one fell swoop either. I stop about, 45, 50 miles north of the cities and I charge, right? And then I do my, then I kind of do my business in the cities on that one charge. And then I charge on the way back. And, and then the other thing they said was 100 miles of charging in a half hour if you can use the DC fast charging. Well, okay, that's great on paper, right? But it's always on paper. I mean, that's my point. Is that's a spec on paper, right? Where do you charge, right? And where do and especially where do you DC fast charge, right? Because all of the other charging infrastructures aside from the Tesla superchargers are crap. I mean, they're slow. I tried charging, charging my Tesla at one in a town where it wasn't close to a supercharger, and I got like 1 mile per hour.
Oh, wow.
I mean, you can't. Luckily, I had enough to get back to someplace that had a charger. So, but it's sort of ridiculous. It's like we're so focused on these statements, right? Oh, we have, and in a lot of cases, of course, there's the additional issue that, that in the auto industry, people have been making compliance cars, right? Just so that they, they can avoid the penalty. But yeah, I mean, that strikes me as kind of a symptom of our problem, right? That we're focusing on these things that we can say rather than, things that kind of practically work. So anyway, we don't have to continue talking for any particular length of time today. If we
how's your card system coming?
My card system is good. I have some cards right here. I take this back and forth to school with me. I am doing this semester. I'm doing a project where I'm having my U.S. history students read primary sources. So one of the things that I'm doing is I'm sort of collecting primary source readings, and they're usually like 1,000 to 2,000 word passages from a primary source. So I'm putting them into an open textbook. But in order to do that, I'm sort of collecting a bunch of things, and then I kind of make notes about them all. And then I decide which ones I'm going to, to put in each week's content and all that. So that's been very useful. Help me kind of collect and number and organize, so that I know where these things are. The other stuff, the kind of my own note taking, where I'm sort of writing source notes and turning them into my own stuff, has been going fairly well. Although I haven't had as much time as I'd like lately to really kind of be doing my own personal research for the next big project. So that
Dan,
yeah.
So how are you finding the organizational piece and the searchable piece and the recollection piece that you can do with digital versus on paper, where you are planting them in certain ways if you're using the Luhmann numbering system, but are you finding you sort of a slowdown with the paper versus digital, or no?
Not yet. No, I haven't gotten to the point with the paper where I think that, kind of the magic that we've all been sort of hoping for, where the thing, starts telling me that, hey, this connects with that. Or, if you're thinking about this, what about that kind of thing? I think that is, I haven't seen it happen yet. But to be fair, I hadn't really seen it happen that much with Obsidian either. My things tended to be sort of connected to the things that I was, that were kind of adjacent to them temporally, right? In the period when I was, when I was working on a particular book and I was taking a bunch of notes out of that thing. They tend to have clumped that way more so far than I've got this idea about about this, about mental health or something, and it connects with this other thing that I had pulled out of an economics thing that I was reading, or evolutionary genetics, paleogenetics thing. There have been a couple of those moments, and especially and actually probably the dawn of everything was kind of the catalyst for a lot of that, because they kind of drew from a lot of different areas. And I was able, and while I was reading that, I was able to sort of connect that with other things that I had been reading about, even like Taleb, right, and things about uncertainty and tail events and things like that.
So you're not missing the Obsidian graph view.
I'm really fascinated. I don't know if it was in Eleanor or somebody, I saw an announcement of the 3D graph with a little demo. Apparently that's like, at this point, it's just like CSS or something, but somebody's developing a module that would allow the graph to rotate, which again, there's an arbitrariness to the way that graph builds itself, right? Unless you're very conscious about dragging things around. I mean, you can drag nodes and they will go someplace, but then they kind of snap back too, depending on how you've got your forces set and all of that. I still love the graph. The frustration that I had with the graph was if there was a way to make, to highlight something and, how you hover over something and you see all of the things that it connects to, right? But then when you follow that to the next thing, you lost that, right? And so now you're, so it's always kind of in the moment, and it's difficult to kind of say, well, okay, and I don't, and probably that's partially because I don't really know well enough how to use the local graph, and that probably there are some ways that I can leverage the local graph to do that. And now, Pat, you're going to say, yeah, the brain will do all that. Right. And I've been playing with the brain too. And actually I've been using the brain to arrange these things so that I know which kind of bucket, my primary sources for I've got all this whole, like I said, I've got these primary sources coming from all these different old volumes, and I keep collecting, old volumes that are sort of filled with primary sources. And and for American history, there was a moment about 100 years ago when there was a lot, when there were people, there was this guy, Albert Bushnell Hart at Harvard, and he was a Harvard undergrad, so he must have come from a good family. And then he went to Germany and he studied under the Germans at the, kind of at the very beginning of professional history, right? And so he came back, and probably under, Ranke and all of those people. And then he came back and he worked at Harvard for 43 years. And he wrote prolifically. And a lot of what he wrote was he compiled primary sources, because this was a moment in American historiography when they really were thinking about, it was actually before the new social history, but it was kind of almost a proto social history where they were thinking about, let's hear some other voices rather than just these things. And actually what I found, what surprised me, was he wrote them not only for college students, but he wrote a version, a kind of a high school version. He even kind of wrote a kids version of sort of voices of American history. So that has been, so pulling all of that together has been cool. And actually I have, although I did all of this on cards and in the brain, I've also been playing with I've only got the first chapter or two put into Obsidian, but I've been playing with putting them in Obsidian, just putting the whole text of all of these primary sources into Obsidian, and then double bracketing, kind of all of the keywords and all of the names and, and locations and all the things that I think it would be interesting to kind of see them all connecting and see, okay, these are all the ones that connect to, this particular Indian war, or this particular theme or whatever. And kind of find them that way, and be able, and actually be able to show students that this is, that these ideas all do kind of connect, and they do, because that's what I'm hoping to do with them is show the students, different perspectives on, and different angles on something like, actually next week we're doing the American Revolution. So, so I want them to hear, to see the British side of it. I want them to see the loyalist side of it. I want them to see the native side of it. I want them to see the, in addition to just, what the Sons of Liberty and the founding fathers had to say. So I do think that Obsidian helps to visualize that kind of stuff, to show that that there is this, first of all, to show that there is this cloud of ideas out there, and then that there are, kind of links and clusters in them. So I do think that is that's an advantage of Obsidian, and I haven't figured out how to duplicate that really in the brain yet. But I haven't, like I said, I haven't had a lot of time to dig that. I saw the 3D. I've got a stack of Eleanor emails that I need to kind of dig through and see, okay, what's new? What is she talking about? And actually every time I open Obsidian now, I get this, I've left that list there of all of the new things, because I haven't read through that and, and really kind of understood, all of the new stuff that they're adding.
The main change in 16.3 was they've added the tabs. Mm-hmm. And now you can stack the tabs so it looks like sliding panes.
I noticed that. It looked a lot like sliding panes. I was like, well, okay, man, I can lose the sliding panes.
Matter of fact, they've deactivated automatically sliding panes now because there's apparently an interference.
Okay, yeah, because it duplicates
the function. But the changes otherwise aren't that major. There was a demonstration by Nick Milo and the creator of Scrintl recently, which I'll post in the community forum.
Cool, thank you.
I just looked for it and realized I hadn't done it. But in the demonstration, she took Nick's LYT kit, his latest kit, number 7, which you can download, which is all markdown notes, just like Obsidian. And she then displayed them in Scrintl, where you can move them around like you would cards on a tabletop.
Ooh, cool.
And so this is able to read your Obsidian notes, but allow you to move them around and arrange them. So I think this has a lot of potential.
That sounds like it has huge potential. Yeah, because that's the thing. That was what I was looking for with this. Was right, the ability to say, okay, this goes with this, and this, and this is how I can order them and organize them, and then, bam, right from there, have an outline, and that, so that would be, that would be huge.
I think Scrintle's like a few months from really going out of beta.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we might get our hands on it pretty soon.
Yeah. That would be cool. Yeah. Because I think that would be, it's, the thing that's frustrated me has been that sort of having to reinvent the wheel, reduplicate, take these markdown notes and stick them on cards on the pegboard in Scrivener or something like that.
Scrivener.
Yeah. Yeah, and I used that for my dissertation. I went from sort of pseudo cards in Tinderbox into the things that looked like note cards in Scrivener, and I arranged things that way. But it was a lot of cutting and pasting.
Right.
By the way, Dan, on our current vault, are you going to add a new folder for this book discussion?
Yes, yes. Now that I'm 100% sure we're gonna talk about Poorly Understood, I will close the I'll leave the Piketty club there, but then I'll just make a number 5 for Poorly Understood, and we can start working in that.
I didn't see the place to vote, so I didn't vote. But yeah, either book sounds interesting, but the Poorly Understood sounds more interesting to me at this point.
Okay. I think what I would do is I said on the book suggestions thing, I said please nominate and vote here, and so maybe what I should do is I should be specific and just say, people should just put their hashtags after the suggestion that they want to read, and then we can just kind of tally them up. So
but we can do Poorly Understood now.
Yeah.
And maybe get the voting.
Yeah.
Like,
yes. Yeah. I think we're doing. Yeah. I think that the fact that that we're here is gives us probably double voting qualifications, right? So we're reading. Yeah, we're reading Poorly Understood now, and then I'll be more specific in the book suggestions and say that we're nominating the next book, and I will. Let me look at Poorly Understood again. It has. Oops, where is it? It has. Should we go by sections then, you think? Because it's got these 6 sections.
Yeah, they're pretty short chapters.
Yeah. So what if we went section a week?
That would be great.
Okay. And so then we'll do so then I'll put a schedule up and we'll do section 1 next week, and then roll through it, and then so will be that'll give people enough time to kind of think about and nominate and vote on what they want to do next in 7 or 8 weeks.
Dan, I'm curious, in your earlier comments you mentioned relative to original sources, you had an open textbook. Is that a Google Docs, something your students have, or?
It's a Pressbooks, actually.
It's a what?
It's in Pressbooks, actually. I'll hang on a sec. I will grab the link for you. Pressbooks is an ebook authoring platform, and so the Minnesota State System has bought an instance of it, and we're publishing kind of open textbooks onto that. And so I put how to make notes and write on there, and then I also have. Actually, the draft is kind of a work in progress, but that's up there as well. Yeah, so it's kind of funny. There's a free version and there's a paid version of how to make notes and write.
So is that restricted to academic use, or?
Nope. It's completely open. It's Creative Commons licensed. And anybody can use it, read it, remix it, do what they want with it. Yeah. So what I'm doing in this is I'm sort of in each part. I've got a part for each of the 15-week semester, and so I've sort of divided the first half of American history into a chronological order, and so I kind of write a kind of a framing narrative, a lecture or whatever that goes at the beginning in the section head part, and then behind that there are whatever, what, half a dozen or a dozen. Actually, it won't be half a dozen because I've got 10 groups, so there'd be at least 10 and sometimes up to 20 primary sources. Oh, cool! Confronting poverty.org.
So the website is, I think, is it by Mark Rank, Confronting Poverty. I just sort of found it
Okay, cool.
just a few minutes before this discussion, and
Oh, nice. Yeah.
it looks like it mirrors a lot of the talking points, and
Oh, risk calculator, facts and myths. Yeah.
so they're also, yeah, they're worth a little bit, like a bit
Cool.
checking out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Well then, yeah. Why don't we do that? Why don't we plan to look at section 1 of Poorly Understood, which is the "Who are the poor" thing, and then yeah, and maybe I'll kind of set that again or against or next to white trash, and see if that, and maybe I'll be able to add some stuff from there, because that has also been sort of the perception and sort of the categorization of people, sort of in the cultural consciousness or zeitgeist or whatever, I think is a big element of this. So
There's a good
sound
book.
good?
Sorry, there's a big good book by The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein as well. It might be worth adding to the list.
Okay, yeah. I haven't heard of that one.
It's about redlining and about like how, I mean, we were talking about the poor and like how they cluster in areas and they don't.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This is a book about redlining and the history, mostly, I think, most after World War II, but like actually pre that too, about kind of.
I have seen that. Yeah, now that I'm looking at the cover, I have seen this. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That, and especially in post-war. I mean, even Levittown was white. And
yeah, and white by design in this bylaws of Levittown.
Right.
Impossible for blacks to buy into it.
Right. And was also, and ironically was also kind of a big Cold War moment, right? I mean, Levitt himself said, you can't be a communist if you're a homeowner. Right. So it's very, there's a lot of ideology that kind of goes into these things.
Yeah, it's worth checking out because it's probably adjacent to Poorly Understood and Piketty also.
Yep. And some of the Thomas Frank stuff as well. Yeah,
for sure.
Cool. Okay, good. That sounds like a plan then. I will also, for people who haven't been, because it's been so long that I've been really active in Obsidian, I will also send out a kind of a big email blast and let everybody know that we're starting again and what we're doing and stuff. So maybe we'll have more people jump back in.
Thank you for sponsoring this and keeping it going.
Well, I'm glad. I appreciate the interest. I wasn't really 100% sure, and actually that's why I didn't download the book yet, because I wasn't really. I mean, I've been sort of dragging my feet and flaking out for so long this summer that I wasn't sure if anybody still wanted to do it.
You had a daughter that got married this summer, I think.
Best wedding I have ever been to. It was fabulous, and she was married. It was in Pittsburgh. She was married at there's a kind of a children's museum place that's in, I think, the original Carnegie Library. I think there was one previous to it, but it's no longer standing in a suburb of Pittsburgh. But kind of the first still existing Carnegie Library has been turned into a children's museum, and they rented the space. And so yeah, we had a whole kind of long weekend of it, and it was a lot of fun.
Why choose Pittsburgh?
She lives there. She went to Duquesne for speech language pathology, and now she works in the Pittsburgh public schools as a speech language pathologist. So, and she met a guy who is a local boy who also went to Duquesne, and they kind of settled down there near his family.
My wife's a retired SLP.
Cool. It's an interesting thing. And actually I have had a stroke. So and I think that and while she was in grad school, it was a 5-year, kind of a master's program at Duquesne. And she came, she flew out and saw me in the hospital, and I was deranged, and it scared the shit out of her, and she decided to work with kids, because she was a little bit freaked out by that. And I recovered, but apparently for a while I was a little bit weird. I don't have a lot of memory of that. So, and she actually has a side job where she works with adults and stuff, but yeah, she likes working with kids and
with brain injuries.
Yeah. And
then autistic during the day.
Yeah, Kate. Well, and a lot of she tells me she does a lot with like swallowing and stuff. So yeah, so there's a lot of I think that the kids have a lot of issues, and it's a it's a troubled area. And I guess Pittsburgh itself has since COVID a lot has changed. She used to live, she and her boyfriend lived in Southside for a while, and she said it's a much tougher place than it used to be. So now they can afford, they both work and they can live out in the burbs. And the burbs are very close, actually. She was only like 10 minutes from town, so that was kind of cool.
Nice.
Yeah, it was nice to just over over one of the big bridges. Yeah, between the city and the airport. So yeah, it was nice. My other daughter is in New Hampshire. The oldest is she's living with her husband in a cabin by a nice pond in rural New Hampshire, and she is doing what do they call it, EMDR, which is a new therapy form. I think that's what it's called, and that seems to be going well. It seems to be, there's huge demand for licensed therapists these days. So, more so than history professors. But, and I have students come to me and say, I think I might want to go into history, but what would I do? I'm like, well, don't expect to get my job, but there are other things you could do. So I think we just, we're in that moment of needing to be much more creative about what we do with these things that we've learned. So anywho.
Louis, I'm curious, are those your drawings behind you?
These are not my drawings behind me. These are my daughter's drawings and paintings.
Look very interesting.
They do.
Very, very talented artist, much more so than me. She's not been like taught or trained or anything. She just, I guess it's her relaxation. She paints and draws and models and things like that. So we're trying to like get her to like maybe take a class and think about something design related. She's started college here, so she's 16. These things were behind me already a couple of years old. So it's our daughter. Yeah,
that's great. That's great. Yeah. Well, it's nice that she's working on actual canvases and not screens too.
I think she started on paper and she wanted some canvases, and now we just have hundreds, literally.
That is cool.
Yeah,
that is cool. That and I don't know. Somehow that is working with actual pigment on an actual physical medium. Seems to have kind of a different vibe than, you know, working on something like Toon Boom.
I mean, she's not interested at all in computer art, at least at the moment. I mean, I think it is so that she finds it a relaxing thing to do. That it's like, you know, it's a, you know, this connection with the hand and the body and the mind, and she just does it for relaxation. She absolutely loves it to do it. So
it's great.
We have a lot of art. Like some of our friends have tried to buy some of her things. We have drawings and paintings in almost every room in this house. So yeah,
that's great. Cool. Well, we should probably wrap up, but I will. I'll get an announcement out on the email to everybody and let them know that we're going to start. We're going to read the first and discuss the first section of this book, the same time next week.
Okay, very good.
All right, sounds good. Well, thanks very much for the continued interest.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, see you soon.
bye.